Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this session where I'll be taking you on a walkthrough of our online campus. My name is Jean Mathieu. That's my bald head floating in space over there. And I am the academic product manager. So that means I oversee the content that is developed for our online learning platform. Essentially, this is where learners engage with all of their content. So their lessons, their videos, their assignments, their work plans, and more. Before we jump into that, a few tips on how to navigate the Google Meet experience, although it seems like everyone's already quite comfortable with it. This is how you turn your camera on and off. We generally encourage learners to keep their cameras on in live sessions so that we can connect and see one another. Red means that it's off, black means that it's on. And then at the bottom, which I see a lot of you have already found, how to navigate to the emojis, to react with emojis. If you click on the smiley face at the bottom of your screen, you'll get the panel of emojis coming up, and you can respond with emojis in that way. And hopefully I don't get too many thumbs downs or crying emojis during this. Okay, you're also welcome during the session. You're welcome to leave comments in the comment chat on the side here. It's next to the person icon. You can leave comments there for questions that you have throughout this session. And one of our team members will respond to those. We'll try to respond to all of the questions. I will be trying to ignore the chat, not because I'm trying to ignore you, but because I'm very easily distracted. And I'd like to make it through the full session. So please do leave the chat there, and one of my colleagues will respond on those chats. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking you through the online campus. And this is where we find, as I mentioned, videos, notes, assignments, and more that learners will be required to complete each week. In the session after this one of the subject specialists, Ms. Smith, will take you through an Ask Me Anything session. So that's the session directly after this one. This is a session where you'll be able to engage directly with the subject specialist about the content that learners have already encountered in the online campus. So this approach of first engaging with materials and then seeing your subject specialist afterwards is something that we call the flipped classroom approach. I hope you enjoy that little slide transition there. So this essentially means a flipped classroom means that learners get to engage with their lesson content independently before having the session with their subject specialist. And this is a very effective way of making sure that you, the learners, can go through the lessons at your own pace, develop your understanding of the work, and then ask questions of your subject specialist in the AMA session. So very different to how you'd have it in, say, just an example, in a traditional schooling system, where your teacher in a single session tries to convey all of these new concepts to you in that one class. And while you're still wrapping your head around this, Sunny sitting in front is really asking some questions. You don't even understand what the questions mean yet. And then the lesson's over and you feel like you've missed your window opportunity and now you have homework for tomorrow. This approach gives you time to first come to terms with the content, to give you space and work through at your own time, and then figure out what questions you want to take to the subject specialist during that session, so that you can have the additional explanations and questions in your AMA session. Okay, so to give you a taste of what this experience is like, I'm going to take you through some lesson content on the online campus in this session. And then in the following session, the subject specialist, Ms. Smith, will do an AMA session based on the same content. So hopefully you'll feel somewhat prepared for that session and you'll get an idea of how the learners are going to encounter the content. I will also take you through one or two other subjects. So I will be taking you through about 3 different subjects, just so that you get an idea of the overall feel of our content, how it's presented, and then also some of the theory that underpins it. Okay, so hope everyone knows what to expect. And now that I've kind of given you a bit of an overview of how the session's going to be working, I'm going to leave these slides behind and I'm going to switch to a tab to show you what the online campus looks like. Okay, so first up, once I enter the online campus, I have this great overview of all the work that I need to do for this week and an indication of what's coming in the weeks that follow. So this module overview will mark off each module as I complete it. So if I complete all my work for Afrikaans, it will be marked as complete. But it's also a very helpful way for me to see where I have formal assessments that need to be handed in. So, for example, this week, if it's module 25, across all my subjects here, I can go down and see that I have no formal assessments to complete. But next week in module 26, I have to hand in a formal submission for life orientation. Again, in the coming weeks, I'll see module 28 is going to have a big submission. Module 29, there's 2 submissions that I need to have, and another submission in module 30. This just helps learners to get a little bit of an idea about what's coming up and where there are important hand-ins. But obviously, we also give our term planners so that learners can plan around that accordingly. And in this case, it looks like because we're towards the end of the year and we're preparing for our final exams, there aren't too many assignments coming up in the weeks that we're leading up to. From here, so this is a module overview where I can see, as I said, current and future modules, but I can switch also to my work plan, which gives me a better view of this specific module. So in this week, the 26th to the 30th of August, from Monday to Friday, these are the components that I'm expected to complete. I know it looks like quite a lot of components, but just to explain that some of these, like a signposting video, will be a 5-minute video that needs to be completed. So there's some tasks that are smaller than others. So it's not something where we're going to be worried about getting through all of this in the week. And as I complete these components, you'll see that we get this blue tick, and that just indicates that that component's been completed, and I can move on to the next module, or sorry, rather the next component. So this is just a very helpful timetable, but it is not set in stone. So this is our recommended work plan so that learners can split up their work across the full week. But there's still a lot of flexibility. We require you to get through all of this work by the end of the week. But as you can see, I started with mathematics. I didn't jump into English as recommended. I started with my mathematics lessons and moved on to Afrikaans. And you could decide to do that in any way you wanted. Perhaps you decide to do all of your maths contents, all of this lesson, you decide to finish on a Monday. More power to you if you decide to do it that way. But it's very flexible. This is just our recommended way of breaking up the content. Okay, so that gives us a view of what we can expect in a single module. And if I click on any of these components, it will take me directly to that subject. So we're going to have a look at social sciences. Let's jump ahead there. Okay, so now we're in the social sciences, we're within this subject. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about navigation in this space. Firstly, on the left-hand side, so I see a lot of chats and I'm trying to ignore, otherwise I'll never get through this. But on the left-hand side here, I'm able to navigate to all of my lessons, all of my content. And it's just an easy navigation panel. So that, say, for instance, you're in lesson 4, in module 4, but there is some content that was covered in module 1 that ties together with this, then you can scroll back and go back to module 1 and review that quite quickly and quite easily. Think of this as just paging back in your textbook to go see previous and foundational content when you do need to reference it. It's very easy to get hold of there. So that's that navigation panel. On the right-hand side here, I'm able to see who my subject specialist is for this course. Sorry, spoiler alert, this is the subject specialist will be running the next session. Excuse me, the AMA session. Ms. Smith will be taking us through that. So I can see my subject specialist on the right-hand side here. I can see all of the academic resources that she's offered. So this is outside of the standard learning content that we're covering. If there are additional resources that the subject specialist wants to add, we think about past papers, interesting articles, anything that would be good practice opportunities for learners, they can get added to this academic resource. And as a learner, I can go and encounter that. I can also join the discussion forum. I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. This is a space where the subject specialist will pose questions. Learners can engage for every single module. So I can see for module 24, Ms. Smith posed a question around module 24 and opened it up for learners. We've got 27 learners engaging with that to say, asking questions, speaking to one another and speaking to their subject specialists so that they can engage with topics outside of their live session time as well. Okay, let's just jump back to the learning path. All right, below that in this navigation panel, I can see my weekly progress for the week. So I can see I haven't done very well this week. I've been pretty lazy and I've got a lot of work to catch up on before I get to the end of this Friday. But I also have here, I've got my next recommended component. And instead of navigating all the way back to the dashboard where I saw my work plan, I can also view a smaller version of my work plan here. If I open that up, I can see all of the work that I need to complete, or I can just follow the recommended up next. And as I skip the English signposting video, that's the next component that's been recommended. So it's quite easy for me to navigate to that. Below that, I have an indication here of the tokens that I've earned throughout my learning path. So you get tokens for every component that you complete. Every time you finish a component, every time you hand in an assignment, for attending scheduled live sessions, you get tokens. And you can rack up quite a few of these. I've got 1,770 here, which sounds like a lot, but other learners have much more than that. And then they're able to redeem those tokens at our reward store. So they could exchange it for something like a Take-A-Lot voucher or a live experience or a raffle ticket to win a bigger prize. So you can get actual rewards for completing your work, apart from the benefits of improving your mind and paving your way for a successful future. You could also get a Take-A-Lot voucher. Okay, so I feel like I'm showing you sort of the perimeter and around the edges. I feel like I'm kind of doing a tour of my house and I've just shown you around the garden so far. So I already want to get into a module and show you what course content looks like. In order for me to do that, I'm just going to have to switch to my personal account. So if you'll just give me half a second to stop sharing here and to just sign into my own account. Thanks everyone for the reaction so far and engaging with everything. I've seen there's a lot of questions coming in on the chat. And thank you for those who are responding to those. If there are any other questions at the end of the session, if we haven't had a time to get to, I'll also just give a bit of time to look through any unanswered questions. Okay, I'm back in on my side. Let's just share. Is that up? Is that sharing? Can anyone see? It's not sharing on my side. Okay. Thumbs up. That's good to know. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down now to the lesson. Our next session with Ms. Smith, the AMA, is going to be on settlements. So I'm going to scroll down to our session. Normally you would know exactly what module you are. I'm coming down to the session on settlements. Okay, so I've already explained what the side panels are, so I'm actually going to hide those away for now so that we have a bit of a bigger playing field and we can see our content a little bit wider. Okay, so we start out with this overview of what's happening in the lesson. We can just see a written overview of what's to come in this lesson, as well as our key learning outcomes and learning objectives from the lesson. And then every module for each subject will start with a signposting video. Just waiting for that to load. Okay, so this signposting video will be created by one of the subject specialists, and it will provide you with an overview of what's to come in this module. What are important concepts for learners to look out for? What should they take note of? What's a big assignment or big work they need to look out for? So I'll just play a few seconds of the signposting video so you get an idea of what these look like.
Module in which you'll need to submit your completed history topic. Hello grade 8, welcome to this week's module. So this week you're going to be looking at an introduction to settlements, which is a focus for this week. Now, before you even learn about settlements in this module, you'll actually get an opportunity and get some time to work on your history task. Now, remember that this is the very same module in which you'll need to submit your completed history task.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. This obviously the video is a bit longer. We could see it 6 minutes, and there'll be an overview of what we can expect to come. As we heard, there's a history task that we're required to submit at the end of this session, at the end of this module. And then again, we have the same overview, these outcomes, so that we know by the end of this week, these are the learning objectives and what we should have achieved by the end of this module. Below this as well, just something to point out here. For every signposting video, we've included a document at the bottom here. That's a handy AMA prep document. I'll show you what this looks like. So this just helps as learners are working through content, they'll be able to use this document to keep track of their own learning and questions and sort of their own annotations as well. So as they're preparing for the AMA, when the week starts, there's a spot for learners to first fill in what do they already know about settlements before the week starts. Once they've watched the signposting video and they've heard a little bit about an overview, what's their understanding after that? What have they learned from the overview? What questions do they have for the AMA? So as they work through their content throughout the week, they'll be able to keep track of questions for the subject specialists so that they don't lose track of those when they finally have the AMA session. They'll have those questions at hand and they'll be able to bring them up. And that just helps learners sort of take a bit of responsibility in their learning process and then also keep track of the questions that they have. Okay, let me come back to the learning path. All right, now we're going to work through to the lessons. I can just click to the next component. The first component is about the history activity. In my case, I've already completed this history activity, so I'm going to skip this. And I'm going to go to settlements, where we're going to look at the introduction of settlements. And here we have our first lesson that we're engaging with. I've got a panel on the side here again, where I'm able to go to each page, or I can just navigate through the learning path. So we can see as we introduce these topics, there's an introduction. I can learn a bit about settlements. There'll be images as well to describe what's happening. And if I click on any image, just to show you, it opens up in a new tab. And it'll allow me to zoom in so I can really see what it looks like in detail, which isn't really required for this specific image. But it is helpful for detailed images, and it is helpful for learners who might have visual impairment and need to zoom in on a specific image. Again, very different to my experience at school, where I might have had a teacher photocopying a worksheet for the last 40 years, and you can no longer tell which way is up and which way is down, because the quality sort of deteriorated so much. So just a helpful enhancement for learners to be able to zoom into each image as well and open it up in a new tab. And then another feature that we've included in our lessons, you'll see at the top here, that although it's written content, I've also got an audio version of this lesson. So it's a downloadable version. So if I want to listen to this lesson in my own time, while I'm perhaps traveling, I want to be able to listen to this lesson, then I could do that. I could download it and listen to it in my own time. And again, if I had visual impairment, it should be a helpful way of going through this content. I'm just going to play the first few seconds of this, just so that you can hear what it's like. Okay, so we can hear a little bit about that lesson. And as you'll see on the following pages, that same audio file is available at the top of each page, so that you can engage with the audio block from there. Okay, so now looking at some content, we're actually jumping into a bit more of the core content here. There's a definition of what settlements are. I'm reading up about this. I can find out that settlements could be rural or urban. Those are the options. I can see some more information, some fun facts that animals also gather in settlements for similar reasons to humans, and then go on to things like key terminology, looking at functions of settlements. I can click through to find out the various functions of settlements, the industries, residential areas, services, recreation, etc. So I have a way of just going through each of those and just splitting them up a little bit. There is more information that I'm encountering, but I've decided I know this content and I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to the next session, the next page, and here I encounter a question. Okay, so now in order to progress, I need to be able to answer some information to see, like, have I been paying attention to what I've read? To be honest, I haven't really. So I'm going to ask anyone in the chat to help me out here. First question, is there two types of settlements? Rural and, did anyone catch what the second one was? Could you pop it in the chat for me? Oh, Radley, fast fingers first. Okay, let's try that out. Urban, let's check. That was absolutely correct. Thank you very much for helping me out, everyone. Next question, settlements are formed by, I'm actually not sure. I'm going to try companies. No, I didn't get that one right. Okay, and here I have some helpful feedback. So that's incorrect, but now I've got a bit of a hint. Think about how the animals tend to settle, like a school of fish. Okay, that's helpful. Let me retry now. Large groups, that's correct. It's not formed by individuals alone, they're formed by groups. Okay, so this sort of way of presenting content with these feedback loops, these questions, it just helps us to ensure that learners are paying attention to the content and that they have an ongoing feedback loop, so that it's not something that they're waiting for the end of a module, the end of a term to check their understanding, but they have a way to continually engage with that and see that they're able to apply that knowledge throughout the learning process. Okay, then some other types of components. This would be happening within a lesson, but at the end of a module, we'll also encounter assessments. Every module will finish off with something that we call a mastery check. So I'm going to jump ahead from the lesson and I'm going to go to the mastery check for this session, which we found out in the signposting video is going to be a history activity. So the first type of mastery check is similar to what you would have encountered in other schools when you have to hand in assignments. This is a handwritten assignment, a handwritten mastery check, where I can see what the activity is, I can see what the pass mark is and the maximum mark, and I've got tips for success. I can view any of these, the type of tips that I encounter, an explanation of why I'm doing this specific work, and then I can also click on my question paper to see what is the activity, what is expected of me. History activity for social sciences, and there'd be various questions again where I need to sign a plagiarism declaration to go through and say this work is my own, and then answer these various questions and submit them. Sorry, Heather, I just saw this by chance. It was 25 out of 50. It was a 50% pass mark, not 25 out of 100. You see, this is why I shouldn't look at the chat. I immediately want to jump in and answer questions when I shouldn't do. So yes, so it's what you'd normally encounter in terms of submitting an assignment. This is a mastery check question, and they would get feedback, graded feedback for this type of mastery check. The other type of mastery check is an auto-assessed mastery check. So this is where you would encounter at the end of a module, you would encounter a quiz component. So these are none of these, the mastery checks, the informal mastery checks, they don't contribute to learners' term mark. They contribute just to learners' understanding. So it's a way of us checking, have they understood that content? We still have formal assessments throughout our learning path, which are formally written, aligned with CAPS assessments, and we make sure that those are submitted, they're graded, and they contribute to a term mark. But every module, we make sure there is some assessment. So these mastery checks are a way of us, it's like low stakes in terms of it not contributing to learners' grades, but it's very important to make sure that it's contributing to their understanding of the content. So this is essentially like a grown-up version of the quiz that we saw within that lesson content. So I can go here, I can go to the preview, and I'll just have more questions about different settlements. I'm just going to kind of pick answers at random here. I'm not going to be doing it very well, I'm just going to put a letter in there. I'm not really doing my work, picking something, and I'm going to finish my attempt. That's the end of my mastery check. I think I've done pretty well. It's really telling me I haven't answered everything. I'm feeling confident. I haven't even finished 3. It's all good. I'm going to submit. Okay, and good to know that I did fail this one. I think I managed to get one correct. But when I fail the content, this is what I'd get. I'd get feedback about what my assessment was like and how I did in this assessment. And the first thing I'll encounter is something we call a remediation video, which is a video created by the subject specialist that will recap the important concepts from that module. So to explain what was difficult about this module, what should you have learned, what do you need to go back to revise. And after engaging with that content and going back to my learning path and actually reading all of my lessons, making sure that I know what's happening in them, I have a second opportunity to attempt this quiz. The way we've created these quizzes, these mastery checks, is that they're drawn from banks of questions so that there's no two times that you attempt this quiz that you'll get exactly the same questions. So even on your second attempt, you'll get some challenges for questions you haven't encountered before. And for each of these, I'll also be able to see if it's correct, it'll explain why it's correct. If it's incorrect, it'll tell me what I need to go and recap. So please review your notes. The case study about Mitchell's plane, you need to go there first. So it's got specific like feedback to say where you need to go, what you need to revise before you reattempt this. Okay, and then outside of that, as I said, there are also the formal assessments. But sorry, one thing I didn't mention about the mastery checks is once you come back for your second attempt, so if you failed your first one, you've watched your remediation video, you've recapped your content, and you come back for a second attempt. If you fail that second attempt, you will immediately be put into a mastery bootcamp session. So where you're with your subject specialist, and they will be able to do remediation with you about what you struggled with in that session and why you didn't pass that specific mastery check. So you'll have a session there to be able to make sure that you're comfortable with the content before continuing with the learning path. Really, the idea about mastery checks is we want to ensure that you are able to master that content. We really don't want learners to move ahead with lesson content before they're feeling comfortable with it. So this is the idea of having a mastery check for every module. And again, those being separate to the graded assessments that we have. So again, this should really lay down the foundation to make sure that each week you're comfortable with 1 week's content before moving on to the next week's content. Okay, now I'm going to quickly change up subjects and give you a bit of an insight into some other subjects. Firstly, I'm going to show you some grade 8 natural sciences. Again, I'm not a subject specialist on this. I'm not the teacher. I just want to show you what the learning path looks like here and show you how it's laid out. And you'll start to pick up on a bit of a pattern, how we introduce the concepts. So this is going to be about how we use microscopes. I can go through some fun facts about things like micrometers. And as I continue, they're showing me how to calculate, do different metrics. There's worked examples. So someone's showing me an example of how the calculations are done first. Then some study tips, a great sort of mnemonic and triangle to show you how you would do certain calculations. And then even for practical steps, like doing these measurements, writing step by step exactly how you would do these calculations and these measurements using something like a ruler. So each worked example broken down into various steps. Even some motivational posters in between, just to make sure that you're feeling encouraged. And then we start getting to activities. Okay, so we start getting to activities that learners need to complete, where they're the type of activities they would get in formal assessments, but again, in a bit more of a low stakes environment where they're able to test this out, test their understanding, click on the memo to get the answers and make sure that they are on the right path. And like I showed you, we'll have a lot of these feedback loops for these sort of quiz, these question sets where learners need to go through and check that they are engaging with this content and they do understand what's happening before they get to bigger assessments. One more subject I'll quickly show you, because I know we've got grade 8 and 9 learners, and I know learners will be joining at different points. Here's a grade 9 technology lesson showing you a little bit about hydraulic press. Again, we're seeing things like we're introducing new concepts. We're finding out about how how something like pressure works, building up to this idea of how the hydraulic press works. Then illustration of what the hydraulic press is, showing you, bringing up important key concepts as well, and even showing little animations of how a simple syringe system could sort of improve your understanding of how a hydraulic press works. These stop and thinks, also just opportunities for learners to check their understanding in like a less formal environment. Then the next page has maybe got a case study that learners should be familiar with about how something like a garbage truck uses hydraulic press, just so that we can root our understanding in sort of concepts that we're already familiar with. Again, kind of continuing this, expanding upon the ideas that are happening within the hydraulic system. More key terms that I need to cover before I encounter some worked examples of how this would work. And then finally getting to, well, here as well, there's a video, then do the calculation. So if I've missed any of the text descriptions, there's a video as well where the subject specialist is taking me through those calculations. And then I have an opportunity to test myself and make sure that I've understood this. So I think you'll see some patterns here in the way we're presenting our content. We'll start off by presenting presenting the key information before we slowly start asking learners to take more responsibility. And this gradual release of responsibility is how our lessons are structured. It's an approach that's called the I do, we do, you do approach, which is easy enough to remember. But the I do approach, starting with the instructor explaining something and telling the learners what is to come, like what they need to know, before getting to we do, where there's worked examples, and you can see how the instructor has completed those examples and found the correct answer, gone through that process. And finally, we get to the you do, where the reins have been handed over to the learner at this stage, and now the learners need to prove that they have understood what they've encountered and understood the worked examples and the way this process has been mapped out by the faculty member. So yeah, that's a little bit that underpins our sort of teaching strategy and the way we present this content. This really was a whistle-stop tour of our online campus, but I hope that you feel like you've gotten a better idea of what it looks like to go through our lesson content. So I'm going to jump back to the open day slides. Where did we end up? On the flipped classroom. As we explained, the flipped classroom also being the way this has been structured. And in the session that follows, where you'll be meeting with Ms. Smith, the subject specialist, she's going to take you through an AMA session that touches on some of what the first lesson we looked at, which was about settlements. So you'll see a little bit about how this ties together what learners have engaged with asynchronously, so the content they've looked at by themselves, before they have the synchronous session with the rest of their cohort, and they're able to ask questions about that. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to have a look quickly at the chat to see if there is anything that we've missed. Any questions that still need to be answered. Again, in some cases, if we don't have an answer for you right away, we'll be sure that we get those answers to you. I'm just opening up the chat. It seems like a lot has been going on. So I'm just trying to see if there's something that we can chat about there. Thank you, Tessa. I see you've also been responding to a few questions. Is there anything that we need to address?
I don't think specifically. I would like to encourage people in the following sessions. We'll be opening up a Q&A section to pop your questions into the Q&A section so that you're not distracted by the chat. So please, going into the next couple of sessions, Q&A is where it's at. Pop your questions in there so our team can answer and respond to them. But also please know that we are making note of the most frequently asked questions that are coming through as well. And we will provide a frequently asked questions document alongside the recordings to everybody who has signed up and attended today. So if you are worried about your question not being answered, or maybe you've missed it in the chat, we will provide that. There's also loads and loads of information on our website as well. I'd really encourage everybody to go and have a look at our website, download the information packs, and there's FAQs on those information packs as well. Great. I think that is us.
Great. Thank you very much, Tessa. And thank you everyone for attending and for asking the questions and engaging.